Superheroes, some of the most influential figures in pop culture and even in my own life. At an early age, I tried to emulate the behaviors that my favorite superheroes displayed, even satisfy the ambitions and qualities they possessed. Whether or not I was successful is a different story, but the values which they encapsulated captivate me to a point like no other. I mean, that's a bit concerning, right? This notion that not to burst anyone's bubble here, but a fake entity can hold so much power over me, and more importantly, over society is proof of how pivotal pop culture is in raising generations and dangerously, possibly confirming already existing perceptions. The millions of fans Marvel Studios and Marvel Comics could, no pun intended, fill a universe. I mean, if you're watching this, I'm going to assume you're a Marvel fan too. But to all my listeners, superhero fanatics or not, I would like to ask you one question. Has it ever crossed your mind that the content you are consuming when submerging yourself in the Marvel world could possibly be a metaphorical mirror of the society for which it was written? Though you think these fantasy worlds are just harmless forms of entertainment, they are so much more than that. They are harborers of bigotry, stereotypes, and ethical standards outlined by society. Don't worry, they're not all bad. More so, they show society's evolution and how those stereotypes have waned over the course of time. This is because comic books speak to people on a one-to-one level like the news never could. As such, they're a reflection of who we are and who we wish to be. With that being said, I'm Yazzie Klein, and welcome to Oh So Marvelous, a video essay miniseries where we explore how superheroes reflect the values of the cultures in which they were created. Through 3 different characters, Captain America, the Wasp, and Loki, I hope to explore each character's values in relations to our society and answer the question, are superheroes a reflection of a changing society or a preservation of a traditional one? Do superhero stories keep up with the times fast enough? Or does their slacking ability to change translate into the perpetuation of backward stereotypes? I find that the answer, which we'll explore further throughout the series, lies in this observation. Superheroes originate as innocent figments of imagination, but ever-transforming political landscape pressure popular culture into adapting to messages and attitudes of the time. But only those with power have the capability to influence these evolving stories, leaving the question of progressive heroes to the eye of the beholder. Captain America was the first character I was introduced to in the Marvel Universe. At a young age, his red, white, and blue costume and, obviously, sharp jaw captivated me like no other. Needless to say, I was obsessed with him. He is literally the definition of perfect, from his hair, to his face, to his muscles, even down to his values, which is interesting because how could his values be perfect? His character capitalizes on the fact that he is the embodiment of the American status quo, yet our nation has changed. Does that mean he has too? In this episode of Oh So Marvelous, we will inspect the character that is Captain America and how he has valiantly reflected American values. As a manifestation of America's desire for virtue, integrity, and invincibility, history unravels in the pages of the Captain America comics, representing the symbol of good in a world so filled with evil. But as our national ideals are continuously shifting, Captain America has to mold and break his persona in tandem with our nation to continue reflecting the shifting definition of American heroism. Captain America served as an integral part of American history through pop culture. His role as an emblem of the American dream allowed him to be used as propaganda to inspire the American public to engage in patriotism, the war effort, and other government initiatives. First and foremost, the golden age of comic books, in tandem with World War II, started with the creation of Captain America, who became an integral part of war efforts by promoting nationalism through the underlying ideas of moral and political complexities. Assistant Director of Undergraduate Studies at Alabama University comments on this in her senior thesis, Patriotism to Skepticism, Captain America and the Changing Cultural Landscape, published in 2011. Brandy Hodo is a highly skilled writer in topics ranging from pop culture to graphic novels and has a myriad of publications dissecting each topic. Hodo examines Cap's embodiment during the 50s, explaining, Captain America proved to be one of the most powerful propaganda tools that the American war effort could ask for. The Captain was a pure embodiment of patriotism. The United States had previously based their patriotism on a sense of isolationism. The new patriotism that the Captain embodies is that of an aggressive, engaging action. The Captain embodies the idea that it is no longer acceptable to remain passive in the face of injustices, but as Americans, The captain and others like him must actively protect their country against outside forces. Rather than representing how America felt about the war, Captain America in his first few issues represented how America should feel. At first, the comics didn't necessarily align with American values, but instead pushed a polarized viewpoint that aligned with authors' personal agendas rather than the public consensus. This was not a terrible thing, though. He was introduced in early March of 1941 with a bang, shocking readers across the world as his cover featured him sucker-punching Adolf Hitler across the face. Cap was dressed head to toe in a suit imprinted with the American flag and carried a badge-shaped shield decorated the same. While this type of political propaganda tool was not new, before the Captain America comics, it was largely ignored. As a result of a complex combination of American isolationism and anti-Semitism, Americans were indifferent to the problems around them. This would change as a patriotic incarnation of the United States would cross the Atlantic and fight Hitler in the pages of a comic, all to convince Americans to do the same, not literally. Unlike many other superheroes, Cap was created with a mission. Although other heroes like Superman and Wonder Woman did promote nationalism and fight against bigotry, they lacked the centrality of Captain America that stuck out to average Americans. His distinct American look, starting off with his red, white, and blue star-spangled suit that embodied American culture to its core, to his choice of weapon, a shield that replicated America's defensive stance. Cap would learn to throw it at his opponents as a symbol of America's refusal to remain passive in the face of immorality. Not only this, but the centrality of Captain America's storyline revolved around the idea of being a part of the American nation, as it engaged in a new patriotism that was foreign to American citizens, such as blatantly speaking out against Nazi efforts due to their contradiction with American ideologies of freedom. He's a paragon of virtue, the peak of humanity, both physically and morally, all while being a poor kid from New York, representing the classic American dream success story. Following the Great Depression, poverty throughout the U.S. was out of control, so a high percentage of the consumers of comics can be inferred to have been heavily affected by the Depression. He was given a chance to change the world, and he offered the same outlet to every American willing to listen. Writer William Pietz expands on this assertion in his senior capstone thesis titled Captain America, the Epitome of American Values and Identity. Although it was published in 2013, Pietz's explanation still offers credible relevance to this topic, stating, Captain America's willingness to die for his country illustrates the essential centrality of the nation to him and, by extension, to every American reading the comic book. This makes the symbol of Captain America much stronger than other traditional symbols of America, such as the bald eagle or the American flag, because Captain America can both embody and narrate America in ways that the bald eagle, the American flag, or other American symbols cannot. Captain America adds a personal connection those other symbols couldn't. As I stated earlier, Captain America offered a new perspective when promoting American nationalism, as his personal connection to the country acted as an outlet for other Americans to relate to. With the addition of his desire to protect our country, Captain America comics were able to continuously promote the purchasing of bonds and war stamps, engaging readers to take action, because he already had created a personal connection to them. Famously, Cap would say, "Wake up, Americans, drive the axis to decay by buying war stamps every day, and buy war bonds and stamps, not because you have plenty of money to spare, not because we ask you to, but buy them as though your life depends on it, because it does." Captain America's demands had a heavy effect on its readers. Coming from the hero of our nation, the reader felt morally obligated to listen to Cap, who simultaneously encouraged nationalism and perpetuated the sense of urgency through the selling of war bonds and stamps. This actively reversed American isolationism socially, as people felt inclined to help and even did help war efforts. As World War II was coming to an end, Captain America comics started to fizzle out of popular culture. His comic book was eventually canceled after a few unsuccessful storylines, later returning to shelves in 1964, where his original writers, Kirby and Simon, completely rewrote his storyline. They scrapped everything Lee had done to the character, starting right where Cap ended, his and Bucky's last mission before the end of World War II. To sum it up, Bucky dies and Cap falls into ice water after deactivating a missile. He is later found and unfrozen in 1964, where he is faced with survivor's guilt and the discovery of a new war in the modern world. After World War II, Americans didn't know what they wanted, yet Cap was the same. This created internal conflict and confusion for the writers of Captain America, which resulted in Cap becoming a representation of the American struggle, especially as it pertained to their viewpoint toward war. Though previously supportive of the government, skepticism now prevailed. The Vietnam War introduced a cynical, anti-war perspective on established authority that shifted core American values which were foreign to the Captain American comics, ultimately creating a rift in the hero's main ideology. The 60s marked a major turning point in American culture in response to the escalation of involvement in the Vietnam War. In comparison to previous wars, the Vietnam War was known to be the first televised war, granting citizens personal war accounts from the comfort of their homes. Nothing was safe from mass media, and as a result, scandals and controversies surrounding the government's involvement arose. This powered anti-war opinions and increased mistrust in the government, birthing the counterculture movement. In his doctrine, The Captain America Conundrum, Issues of Patriotism, Race, and Gender in Captain America comic books from 1941 to 2001, published in 2011, Richard Hall explains this discrepancy. Throughout the decade, Cap could find himself either fighting or supporting social protesters, always unsure as to which side was right. While Superman, Wonder Woman, and even Batman still defended the status quo, Captain America was already asking the same questions as its readers. What did America stand for? Where was America going? In the new Marvel age of relevance, Captain America clearly led the way for readers. The world had changed since Steve last saw it, so it is no surprise he was questioning foreign topics discussed in the media that even citizens grew skeptical of. When he woke from the ice, Steve's philosophical paradigm shifted as he became a symbol of an idea and not the embodiment of the government under which he was created. But what was that idea? There was no clear definition of what it meant to be an American, as society felt betrayed by their own country. Cap, just like the American society, became uncertain to where his loyalty should lie. Should he question authority as this younger generation seemed intent on doing? If so, what would that say about him or about America? Should he stay loyal to the government he had sworn to protect? Out of the 10 years the U.S. was involved in the war, Captain America comics only discussed the Vietnam War once, in Captain America and the Falcon, issue number 183. Cap distraughtly explains, "From the moment I returned to life in 1964, at the beginning of our Vietnam War, I felt out of my time. There was no way I could keep calling myself Captain America, because the others who acted in America's name were every bit as bad as the Red Skull. Oh Lord. If I wasn't prepared for any and all threats to American dream, then what was I doing as Captain America?" This, in comparison to the 58 out of 75 Captain America comics that feature World War II from 1941 to 1950, demonstrates the discrepancies of opinions surrounding the media, which ultimately affected Cap's stance regarding the war. Author Jill Dahlman further explains Cap's circumstances in her essay, Captain America, All-American Punk, published in 2019. Dahlman, an assistant professor at California North State University, has a myriad of published essays regarding superheroes, even some being included in award-winning books. She explains, Captain America faces a crisis unlike any he faced within the Avengers when it comes to his stance over the Vietnam War. It is significant that the most patriotic superhero in the business, the superhero created for the sole purpose of promoting patriotism in a time of war, chooses to stay on the home front and says very little about Vietnam. Captain America's stance reflects the uncertainty of the times. This no position reinforced the no position or get us out of Vietnam position that many Americans were taking over the war. This analysis by Dahlman touches on the crux of the situation. The decisions made by the writers of Captain America had the power to affect sentiments among the American public. The writers were influenced by society's opposition to the government's involvement in the war to create an uncertainty complex for Captain America. When society saw their own struggles being reflected in their favorite superhero, it affirmed their emotions and only furthered confusion and dissent over the war. While the American government might have wanted him to support their involvement wholeheartedly, Cap's decision to be neither isolationist or intervening shows how he believed in the strength of the American people more so than a blind devotion to the government. This was more akin to the American dream, which stands for the power of the people above all. Like his readers, he was in no man's land, which we'll further explore in the next part, unable and even unwilling to fend for the country he once fought with such passion for. Cap's choice embodied a shift in the meaning of patriotism and morality. Rather than defining it as a blind and unyielding devotion to one's country's government, it became a more individualistic and autonomous concept that involved making decisions on a situational basis guided by knowledge as exposed by the media and personal morals. As mistrust of government and unrest over social injustice propagated across the United States in the 1970s, the creators behind Captain America lessened their allegiances to the government. Specifically, Cap was confronted with two major moral dilemmas. The Watergate scandal challenged Captain America's previously binding trust and respect for official government leaders, and the civil rights movement forced Cap to reevaluate the extent to which the American government represented all of Americans' people. By 1972, the United States' hostile political climate had not improved. While the United States was deeply involved in the Vietnam War, Republican candidate Richard Nixon ran for re-election with a forceful campaign. The discovery of Nixon's illegal campaign resulted in a political disaster and contributed to the country's following polarization, like two magnets. In 1972, writer Steve Englehart took over writing Captain America and used the comics to directly address the political turmoil of the time. Englehart created an online archive to discuss his thought process when writing his comics. In one of his submissions, Englehart explains his opinions on his rendition of Captain America during the 70s. He presents, "The problem across the board at Marvel was that this was the 70s. Prime anti-war years, and here was a guy with the flag on his chest who was supposed to represent what most people distrusted. No one knew what to do with him. I had to ask myself, who is Captain America? And had found an answer for the man. Thing was, America was moving from the overarching Vietnam War toward the specific crimes of Watergate. I was writing a man who believed in America's highest ideals at the time when America's president was a crook. I could not ignore that." In his storyline, it was revealed that a high-ranking government official was part of a secret terrorist organization called the Secret Empire. Steve Rogers, in absolute disgust and utter shock, became disillusioned with the U.S. government and resigns his title as Captain America, becoming the Nomad, a vigilante-type hero unaffiliated with any form of power. As Englehart adds, the name Nomad suggests the character and every American citizen was wandering in a political no man's land, unsure of who we were or where we were going as a nation. Steve reasoned that he could still represent America's ideals, the real power behind America, without blindly serving its occasionally questionable government. This new idea that Rogers felt foreign to his own character's ideals was not something new to the writers nor fans. As I explained earlier, during the Vietnam War, which was very much still happening during the Watergate scandal, it was common for people to feel distant from the place they called home, especially the government it ran under. Watergate only further solidified suspicions around the government and confirmed individuals' distrust in it. It is no surprise that someone such as Captain America had himself come to this realization. And as we know, Captain America is not shy to this right side of history. This was Steve at his most radical. He created his own costume, fighting vigilante, and while it only lasted for 4 issues, it had an immense impact on Cap's relations with his governmental ideals. It is only fair that he not only had to reevaluate his long-standing values, but chose to side with the American people. Cap took the mantle as the Nomad to stand alongside the more liberal American citizens, protesting the corrupt government, showing where his values resided, not with the tainted system, but with the American people he himself identified with. Cap was able to feel the pain, agony, and frustration most Americans felt, and while he was not able to successfully defend the government, realizing he could support American ideology without blindly following the United States government, he was able to promote an empowering view on taboo subjects at the time, becoming the champion of racial injustice. Aside from being the Nomad, Captain America spent most issues addressing the scrutiny African Americans faced during the Civil Rights Movement alongside his partner at the time, the Falcon, an African American war veteran. The confusion and fear of white Americans and the anger and frustration of black Americans blended well with the two partners, allowing explorations of realism into the comics as they spoke openly about controversial topics such as race-targeted violence and social disadvantages. In Captain America issue number 134, published in 1971, these topics are at the forefront of the plot. During this issue, the Falcon and Cap defeat crime lord Stonehead when Sam Wilson's, the Falcon's alias, is informed his nephew is working for him. Sam ponders, "I'm thinking of the thousands of kids like him out there, kids who've lost faith in the law, in the world around them and themselves, kids with no one to turn to, no one to trust, with nothing but bitterness and contempt for the system. Where do they go, Cap? What do they do? What chances do they have? Captain America responds, "That depends on us, Sam, on all the men of good faith everywhere. So long as there are men willing to fight for justice, for tolerance, and for understanding, then maybe, just maybe, those kids will make it." The writers of the comics address pre-existing systematic inequalities that result in the creation of gangs and why people turn to them for safety and security in the first place. As Wilson explains, the law let these kids down, and Cap acknowledges these factors that led Sam to assure him that they would continue to fight for what's right. This is big as Cap had to continuously defy the ideals of the government, who disregarded racism and segregation, and addresses his problems on his own accord. During the cultural struggle of the 80s, Captain America furthered his deviation from the American government by serving as a form of commentary on the dangers of blind patriotism without humanitarianism. He embodied the role of a hero by speaking out against wrongdoings and warning of future peril to come if we do not admit flaws in the current political system and work toward the equal and democratic world Captain America once stood by valiantly in the World War II golden age of comics. Similar to other pop culture icons, Captain America had to reinforce his stance on his political affiliation, even if that would deter some of his avid readers. In Captain America issue number 322, published in October of 1986, he did just that. "Some folks misunderstand me," he said. "They think I represent the American government, its political system, or its official policies. I don't. I represent the American dream, the notion that human beings should have the opportunity to better their lives and attain their noblest aspirations." Cap's ability to differentiate between our government and the American dream is crucial to understanding patriotism versus nationalism. The creators of superheroes like Cap wanted to build the best America possible rather than accept the status quo. So they worked to create role models who recognize our potential for justice as a country and beseeched us to love America for what it could and should be rather than settling for what it has become. The American dream through the 80s was forced to fit into a mold that couldn't complement both political parties, satisfying those who so heavily wished to achieve it no matter their political affiliation. Although Cap isn't tied to any political party or philosophy, right here he effectively dodged the question while filtering a heavily left dialogue. His statement almost contradicts itself, as his definition of the American dream really only satisfies politically left principles, such as equal opportunity, ultimately putting him in that box. The statement backfired, upsetting conservative fans, and in the next issue, John Walker was introduced, a completely different super soldier introduced by the US government when they claimed to have successfully recreated the serum that gave Cap his powers. He debuted first in Captain America number 323, and according to Inverse writer Eric Francisco, who has deep history in media and involved in various Marvel projects as not the new Captain America, but as an anti-Captain America called Super Patriot, Francisco adds that he was more concerned with media popularity and ignored crimes he saw occurring in front of his face if he deemed them unimportant. Super Patriot then truly did not have his finger on the pulse of the 80s. He was interested in using violence, more concerned with media glamour, and unconcerned with the downtrodden or working class. Measured against Cap, who was shaped in his early years by poverty, activism, and social reform, Super Patriot was more in touch with society of the time. The overly leftist underlying theme in the comics wasn't doing well, and the authors were quick to respond with this embodiment of the character readers pleaded for. The Super Patriot tended to readers, offering a more realistic implication of what Captain America should look like. Where Steve is loyal to his version of the American dream, Walker's overly patriotic and the antithesis of the outdated ideals Cap stood for. This may seem like the author succumbing to the wishes of the reader, but Walker's presence actually reinforced the dangers of blind patriotism. It was necessary that the two were against one another in order to solidify a greater point about the dangers of going to either extreme. Whether it's a complete abandonment of or submission to one's government, both Captain America showed that the key to making moral choices lies in the balance between these disparate stances. As we conclude, we must detail the effects political landscapes presented through the Captain America comics. Captain America started as a detailed way to progress Americans into aiding the war efforts during World War II. He was a beacon meant to stir up and amplify patriotism at mass level. Yet Cap has strayed from his inception as a governmental tool to better reflect the American society he swore to protect. He, like Americans, has found himself disagreeing with the American government more than once on different social, political, and economic issues, and has had to alter his original devotions to the American government to better serve and reflect the American people. The more Marvel continues to diversify the Marvel universe and hone into more liberal beliefs, the more we see Captain America's character deviate further from his blind allegiance to the American government. As a manifestation of America's desire for virtue, integrity, and invincibility, American history unfolds in the pages of Captain America, representing the symbol of good in a world so filled with evil. Captain America's evolution proves that superheroes might originate with one purpose, but society and changing political landscapes have the power to adjust that trajectory to better adapt to the opinions and attitudes of the time. Thus, superheroes can amplify existing messages among the society for which they are written. But what messages get selected as worthy of amplification is where the root of the issue lies. We see this becoming problematic when Marvel writers shifted into a stance that was considered too liberal by a wide variety of readers, leading to the antithesis of Captain America, John Walker, being created. He portrayed an unyielding devotion to the American government. The writers, at the end of the day, are at the mercy of society's needs and wants, and the alignments and ideals of the superheroes in the comics are created to please the population that is reading about them. Thus, the extent to which superheroes can affect society should be taken with a grain of salt, as, at the end of the day, superheroes are made to reflect and appease the societies for which they are created. Their capacity to influence works more like a megaphone, amplifying existing voices, than as a new movement with the ability to defy and change society. When superheroes change, it's because society is changing, and not the other way around. Superheroes keep up with the time, but if the times are backwards and prejudicial, so are the superheroes. If we want superheroes that pave way for a more progressive world, we need writers that aren't so susceptible to societal pressures. In our next episode, I'll analyze the Wasp and possibly give us more hope for Marvel writers that are willing to break through the mold. Though the writers of Captain America felt the need to level out their political stances and appeal to all audiences, creators of the Wasp, after much misogyny, seems to finally be learning that the only way to bring about change is to be the change and put out content that is new, different, and indicative of the world we want to see. I'm Yazzie Klein, and this is Oh So Marvelous. Thanks for listening.